All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling two heavy hitters in the marketing world, Neil Hoyne and Avinash Kaushik.
This should be good. Two brilliant minds, but their approaches kind of different, you know.
Exactly. We've got a stack of their articles and presentations. So, our mission, to find out where they totally sync up and where their ideas, well, maybe clash a bit.
I'm excited to see how this plays out. Should be some fun friction for sure.
To kick things off, let's talk about Neil's toothpick rule. You know, that idea that getting things moving is often more important than aiming for perfection.
Ah, yes. And he tells this great story all about U.S. politics. Remember back when lobbyists used to wine and dine politicians with these fancy steak dinners?
Oh yeah, those were the days.
Well, Congress eventually put the kibosh on those, banned them. But clever as they are, they found a loophole.
What, they couldn't resist a good steak?
Exactly. Turns out any food you could eat standing up using a toothpick, totally fair game.
Wait, so picture this. A room full of politicians, all awkwardly trying to nibble on tiny steak cubes with toothpicks.
It's a pretty hilarious image, right? But Neil's point is powerful. Sometimes a good enough solution, something you can implement quickly, is way better than waiting forever for the perfect one.
So true. We can get so hung up on finding the perfect campaign or the perfect metric that we end up paralyzed, just stuck.
Analysis paralysis, we've all been there.
Totally. And the toothpick rule is like a little nudge, you know, to just start, make those small improvements, and iterate as you go along. What do you think?
Oh, I'm all about that. Think about how many times we've put off a project because we're waiting for just the right data or the perfect strategy. It can be crippling.
It's like we're scared to take that first step unless everything's perfectly lined up.
Exactly. This rule helps us break free from that fear.
It makes me think about Avinash's emphasis on balancing effectiveness and efficiency. He's really big on this idea that you can't just focus on one at the expense of the other.
It's a classic marketing trap, right? Getting so fixated on, say, just lowering your cost per click that you totally miss the big picture.
You can end up sacrificing the quality of your leads or even shrinking your market share if you're not careful.
Yeah. He uses this example of a company, right?
So if I wanted to learn about incrementality, measurement, customer lifetime value, I would put in Converted, a book by Neil, and Octum's Razor, which is a blog by Avinash, into Notebook LM, and it will produce a 12 to 14 minute podcast for me to intake both of these industries leaders. Fortunately for everyone in this room, there's not a whole lot of AI today because they're here with us, which is really, really exciting, and you get to interact and ask them whatever questions you have. And we're super excited to co-sponsor this event in partnership with Croud, which is one of our amazing agency partners. And the partnership with Croud focuses on two things. It focuses on people and capabilities and building expertise across both. And that's what we want to do here today. 2016, 17, was that the year of mobile? Who knows? But 2025 is the year of measurement. Getting marketing aligned with finance. And it's one of the big things that here at Google and at Croud we want to achieve together with our shared clients who are in this room. To moderate this conversation, we have Fernando, who is one of our agency partnerships lead. He's right over here. He used to work at Waze for a very long time, and he has one of the most interesting jobs in this room. It's to balance both Neil and Avinash and everyone's questions, which will be very exciting. We have about an hour for this structured fireside conversation. We'll open it up to Q&A 45 minutes in. And then for a more intimate discussion, we have two roundtables, one with Neil and Fernando, one with Avinash and Chris, where you can ask them questions on a one-on-one basis to get all the information you need to make your marketing and business campaigns more successful. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Fernando, and please join me in welcoming him. Thank you. Good?
Morning, everyone. Okay, for a second I thought I would need more energy from the room, but I feel good. How's everyone doing? Good? Okay, so we have almost 2 hours together, and I'm really excited. As a Brazilian, it's really warm inside. I feel great in here. So we're gonna do a couple of things today. So I'll be sitting here, and to be honest, we have today two of my favorite speakers, and they'll be sitting right over here. So let me do two things. I'm gonna intro them first. I'll try to make this fun, number one, and then I'll share exactly what we'll be doing the next hour together. Sounds exciting for the next 2 hours? Okay, let me start with Avinash. I have the more formal bio. I'll do that in a couple of seconds, and I'll share a quick little story of how I met him 10 years ago. Avinash is the Global Chief Strategy Officer at Croud. I've been managing the partnership with Croud for a year now. Croud is a leading full-service marketing agency. His prior professional experience includes a 16-year stint at Google. He's a passionate teacher who shares his perspectives frequently via multiple channels. Does anyone here subscribe to his weekly newsletter? Hands up, please. Okay, so if you don't, you're missing an opportunity. They're very insightful, and you're also doing a little bit of good. So far, he's been able to, I think we're at $100,000 and counting for charity. So not only they're very insightful, but we're doing a little good there. So please sign up. Also a bi-monthly blog and 2 best-selling books. So clearly, Avinash has been doing a lot over these last 25 years. He works with some of the largest brands in the world on brand strategy and marketing transformation. Avinash, can I invite you to come join me for the next hour? Can I go off script?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Do you remember the last time we met?
Yeah, this up here.
No, that wasn't the last time we met. It was in 2014. I had just joined Google in Brazil, and you traveled to São Paulo, Brazil, for one of your amazing keynote presentations, and you were talking about the evolution of mobile. And you chose my only client and their website, and you were telling the entire audience about how there was room to improve their mobile experience. So that's how it all started exactly 11 years ago. So I'm happy we're on stage together 11 years later.
Yes, no, I'm excited.
Great. Neil, you're Google's chief strategist. Honestly, you're one of my favorite presenters. You're so dynamic, and one of the things I really appreciate you is you both bring a lot about your successes to your presentations, but also you talk about your failures. So please, can you join us on stage?
You can keep going. I don't want. I like this. Keep.
It's
You're saying best presenter. Keep.
it's a huge bio. So I'm going to try to be dynamic in the next hour. So we'll skip the bio. I'll tell you a little bit about the last time we were together. Do you remember when we were together last time?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I mean,
Was I nice to your clients?
You were. You actually were. You were. I need to do better branding because you don't remember last time we were together. Okay. We were in LA together a year and a half ago for the leadership circle with our agencies, and you had our keynote in the event, and I remember really vividly, and maybe once a week I use your example, your analogy of how important it is to just run faster than some of your competition when a bear is running towards you. So hopefully you'll tell us a little bit more about that story today.
Of course.
This is a treat. So let's tell the audience what we'll be doing together for the next 40 minutes. And I want to make sure we have 20 minutes in the end for questions from the audience. And then we have 2 larger tables at the very back where we'll have you, Neil, to the left, and Avinash will have you to the right. And then we'll have another 30 minutes for a more intimate conversation with the 2 of you. So this is a conversation. I have good news. We don't have any slides today. So it's not every day you can actually come to our offices, and it's just truly a conversation. So this is supposed to be extremely informal. And I think this is really us, Google, trying to be as humble and hungry as possible with so many of our partners, and really being open for feedback regarding our year and how important we want our measurement strategy to be. So we're going to start understanding incrementality. We'll do that for 5 minutes or so. And then we have a couple of blocks. We'll do 10 minutes around how to measure incrementality. We'll talk about brand measurement, and when you're talking about brand and performance, how to do that effectively. I have a bias, and I talk to my team every single day about the bias I have for action. So we'll talk about a bias for action. What can the audience do today? So we'll do that for 10 minutes, and then we'll open and we'll have 20 minutes for questions from the audience. After that, we'll have 30 minutes for the roundtable. How does that sound?
Great.
Cool? So let's start this. Let's have a little bit of fun. How would the 2 of you, and this is totally off script, how would you define the success of the next hour together? Like, what do you want to do in the next hour? I think a lot about measurement is us defining the success of how we're investing our time together. What do you want? What do you want from the next hour?
Well, I want the audience to make 10% more revenue in the next month.
Wow. That's ambitious. Neil, what about you?
I like that goal. I'll go a step further, just how I approach this. In the area of measurement, what frustrates me is that the only cases I see are those of success stories, right? You go to keynote stages and everyone's on board like, look how easy this was to build my attribution model or my MMM. Avinash, you and I will talk about that. And you look at that and all of a sudden you're like, it seemed harder for me. It seemed harder for my company. How do I achieve these things? And so what I love to bring to the table, and hopefully this makes all sense, we'll pull all you, is also where companies struggle. Because I think every company struggles when it comes to measurement, but it's difficult to find that empathy. And oftentimes when you run into a project, whether it's incrementality, attribution, MMMs, AI, if you think that all the stories are success cases and you run into difficulty, you think that you're doing something wrong. And so part of it is just that raw reality that we face when trying to do this stuff, what's right and what's wrong, and all the hurdles that come along the way. So if I can share a little bit about that side, about what the reality of measurement is, I think that's time well spent. But we went through the agenda. I think we're all in alignment. How about everybody here? Anything? I'm taking over. I'm sorry. I'm just curious. Is there anything we missed on the agenda for all of you?
This is us being dynamic and off script. So I'd love to hear from the audience. What do you expect for the next hour?
What makes you happy? And I will cold call the Googlers because I know who they are.
I'll just throw this to a Googler I know and like so that we can start the conversation.
Thank you. Very much looking forward to the conversation. Measurement is a journey, and translating that journey into signposts to bring executives along on the way is really important. So I would love to help unpack for the audience how you crawl, walk, run, because I think that's so much of what great measurement actually looks like in practice. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to add on the same note. I work in an organization where obviously the executives have been there forever. It's a privately owned company with pretty good scale, but the challenge is really they're so ingrained into the methodologies that have been there for like a decade or more than that. It's hard for people like me to convince them to move on from that kind of where they're grounded. They want everything in the same methodology, baked in the way they want it to look at, and just don't want to move beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So we'll have time for those two.
Yeah.
But keep me honest, in 35 minutes from now, we'll have more time for questions. So thank you, you two, for being so brave. I have a question for us to start. We could be having this conversation a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years. What are some of the trends and some of the very specific factors that are happening right now that could help us timestamp this recording as a conversation that happened in January of 2025? What is happening right now that you think marketers should be considering that wasn't happening a year from now within this broader measurement conversation?
I mean, I'll kick it off. Look, some of the challenges we face are like perennial. There's nothing starting right now about how come companies mostly still suck at marketing. They do, and the challenges are, some are related to measurement, and we'll explore them a lot more today. But the others are just what does it take to like persuade an organization to do hard stuff? And I think that remains a perennial challenge. I want to anchor it in that. But the thing actually I'm really excited about is agentic AI, you know? Like I've spent the last month building a bunch of agents. They're doing some really cool stuff. And it's sort of opening my eyes about what else we will be doing at this point next year. So like the first agent I built end of November it just goes to the UN website. It scrapes a bunch of data for me that is at the UN website, does it every day. And then every 7th day, it sends me an email about insights about what has changed in the data. I'm really surprised how good it is. Like a human does this work today, and I can just have an agent do it. Mm-hmm. Or another agent I built to do SEO for me. It's really cool, and I'm really excited about how like currently what we build, about 30-40% of SEO services can just be agentified. I'm really excited about this part of giving these agents narrow tasks that currently humans do. I'm sort of really excited about it at this moment in January.
Neil, anything you're excited about, concerned about specifically in January of 2025?
Specifically, not concerned about. I'll tell you where the opportunity is. It actually ties to that question. So there was a study that came out earlier in 2024 that found out, and I don't know if this is true, I won't ask by a show of hands, but that 2/3 of leaders in organizations will ignore data if it contradicts their intuition. I was going to ask by a show of hands, how many people here think their bosses are data-driven? Really. What I love about these moments, politically safe, I appreciate it, is that it forces people to challenge their assumptions about how their business operates, about how they make decisions. In steady state markets, people feel confident. I know what's happening, and they don't come back to challenge the fundamentals. I'll use simple dashboards as a way. It's oftentimes the case where I'll work with a company and they'll say, here's a better way to measure our performance. But that change over what they've done historically causes them to question some of the decisions they've made. Say, if we look at the world in this way, where we put our money last year was a really bad decision. And so they don't want to see that, so they keep things constant. When we get into these cycles of change, and notwithstanding the significance of AI, but just AI as a subject, it prompts a lot of leaders to say, is this real? What are we doing? Should we rethink the way our business is operating? And those are much more productive conversations. And since we're at those points, I find more people are willing to come to the table to say, I don't know. I don't know where things are going. I don't know if what we've been doing in the past will sustain us in the future. And then they become open to suggestions. Now, those suggestions can go either way. It can be really easy for them to buy a whole bunch of software they don't need. But it can also be times to say, is this a time where we have to look at different KPIs, different technologies, different ways of approaching our customers? And at that point, data actually can move in and say, this is what we're seeing happen in the market. So we're at one of those points. I just hope it goes in a very positive way, as opposed to, this is a quick way to throw money and technology at solving it, as opposed to looking at our processes and how we consider that data.
Great. So let's start by defining incrementality. And Avinash, I love your definition. You define it as business results from marketing tactics that would not have happened otherwise. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Can you give us actually practical examples and recent examples where you've seen incrementality in your research at Croud?
Yes. The last job I got at Google, I spent 5 years on it. I got because I was at a meeting with Ruth Porat, who's the CFO of Alphabet at that point. And she said, Avinash, what would happen if I fired all 3,500 people in marketing? And I said, I don't know. I think she was asking me because I'm the expert. But I said, I don't know. But the essence of what Ruth was asking was, what's the incrementality of the several billion dollars we spend on marketing at Google itself? And sort of it set me on this journey. And that's, so you read the more formal definition. But basically, for me, it's as simple as, if we spend $2 million a year doing email marketing, what happens if you turn it off? If we spend $10 million on Google, although all of you should be spending $100 million on Google, what happens if you turn it off? That's it. That's it. It's the ability to prove to the CFO that marketing adds non-normal value. And it sort of, Ruth set me on like an entirely new direction on Google's behalf, and now with our clients at Amazon and HP and Coach and Compare the Market and Timberland. I am in the business of bulletproofing the CMO from the CFO. And as long as we solve for the CFO, you will automatically bring incrementality to the game. And it completely changes the kind of marketing you do, because everything becomes harder suddenly. Some people say, like, should we just phone it in our search strategy by buying a whole bunch of brand keywords? You can. It's a lazy way to solve a problem. But at the same time, there's for every one query for my brand, I can probably have 100,000 non-brand queries, if not 1 million. But solving for non-brand is really hard. And if you look on a dumbass last click basis, it also looks bad. But if you look on the basis of incrementality, suddenly your company is doing the hard work that nobody else is doing. and you're solving a problem that is worth a ton of money. So for me, incrementality is about going back to the CFO and saying, we are worth it. We shouldn't be the first budget to be cut in the hard times. And it's hard work. It's really hard work because good marketing is hard to do. But I love solving that problem with incrementality.
And why is it so important to truly make a distinction between attribution, incrementality, the importance of both?
Yeah.
How do you start that conversation?
Yes, absolutely. So years ago, when Neil and I were in the same building at Google, everybody used Google Analytics and they used last click attribution to measure success. And that's an unwise representation of a consumer journey. Because nobody comes to any website, even to buy toothpaste, and constantly buys right away. So my colleague Pooja is here. We work at Coach. And you're not going to buy a $500 purse. All of you should buy a $500 purse. Buy the Tabby. It's really great. The shiny one is my favorite. But you're not going to buy right away. So we took one step forward to say, let's actually do multi-touch attribution analysis. And what it does is it looks at the entire consumer journey and helps you farther along in understanding what helped influence a business's decision. So if you go to Michael, he works at InfoTrust, one of our Google agencies, and Michael will help you understand that. And instantly what happens is you suck less. And that's why I love attribution modeling. You suck less. Sucking less is a great life goal. You suck less every day, you will be in the 1% successful people in the world. Just suck less every day. The difference between attribution and incrementality is attribution doesn't answer the question, what if we had done none of that marketing? It will still say that those Facebook ads deserve some credit. Because on a non-incrementality basis, your Facebook in-feed ads look decent. In reality, they might suck. They often suck royally. I'm not just saying that because I'm at Google. But in order to truly understand what is the value of those Facebook in-feed ads, which my attribution modeling is saying assign 20% of the budget, that question attribution cannot answer. That question is only answered with incrementality. So the journey that both Neil and I advocate for is, if you're still on last click basis, God save you. At least do multi-touch attribution modeling, because it will make you suck less, it will allocate budget more efficiently. You can, at Croud, we're really excited that we build this automation engine on top of MTA to overcome the politics of MTA. And now we can automatically change bids and budgets. Automatically, you're doing better. But then, if you want to have a conversation with the CFO, which is what both Neil and I obsess about, then you have to take the incrementality answer, because that's the lens the CFO is applying. What if I cut your budget and give it to the retail stores team? What if I cut your budget, give it to the logistics team? What if I hired 10 more people in HR? That's the fight you fight with incrementality.
Neil, you have this gift and this ability to simplify concepts. You're invited to so many exciting meetings, and you're talking to CFOs, CMOs. Like, how do you simplify some of these concepts? Like, how do these conversations go when you have a CMO and a CFO in a room, and you're trying to talk about attribution and incrementality? Like, how do you try to simplify an explanation of these really complex topics?
So here's where we start. When you ask executive leaders, how often do you trust people? So let's talk about a board or CEO level. 90% of what a CFO says will be trusted and by virtue will be acted on. 90%. They have standards and policies. Marketers, 10%. All right, so that's where we start. Now, if you look at board composition, and just because I have this number, I don't know how this flows into CFOs, I would imagine it's even smaller. Less than 3% of boards in America have any marketing experience on that board whatsoever.
I believe it, yeah.
Most common thing I see, and I sit on a few boards, I advise a couple boards, is that you get in there, you see a beautiful presentation from some very talented marketers in their agency saying, this is all we're doing, and look at all the math and science, and then they leave the room, and the board's like, can we discuss this together? And you're like, yes, we're gonna do it. And then door closes. Someone sits up. Did anybody understand any Any of that is like, well, I heard they said incrementality, and that's a good word for us. And so they do it, but they don't understand the story. Now that works if you're just looking to continue doing the same thing. Oh, we've always done incrementality, they're continuing. If you're trying to introduce something new and say, we're going to start using AI to predict how customers will behave, or in my world, customer lifetime value, then they simplify and they say, well, we're doing something different, should we? And they try to understand why, and if that trust is not there, then it says, are the marketers trying to escape accountability? Or are they trying to cover for bad numbers? They're saying, our revenue wasn't up today, but we invested in brand so that revenue will come. That sounds like an excuse. And so the way you tell the story to these groups is important. And so let's tie this together with these ideas of incrementality and attribution. I look at attribution, there's not a lot, Avinash put it eloquently, but I look at attribution as being incrementality in context, which is if I look at a single event, that's great, but what about a chain of events? Now, my wife hates when I share the story. She's a Googler, so invariably after these events, she's like, you told the story. But here's the way I frame it to some boards. I say, look, when I started dating my wife, 2007, I bought flowers very regularly, right? I don't buy flowers that often now because it's not incremental. But if we were to look at it in context, and Avinash should not tell you. Now, if we look at it in context, you could say, so are flowers incremental to a relationship? Well, it depends. Where are we in that journey? Right now, watching the kids is more important. And she'll tell me, like, give me a day off, I'll go get a massage. I don't save the money on the flowers. And so if we treat everybody the same way and just say, regardless of where they are, we are looking at an individual channel or an interaction, that's kind of silly because you keep giving everybody the same message at the same time. And attribution helps us pull that apart and say, how are things happening in sequence? And incrementality says, are we making a change? But it comes down to those stories with those groups. Even when we use some of the language here, we talk about brand and performance. When you get outside marketing, those mean very different things. And so the reality, we talk about performance, short-term, immediately actionable. This is why nearly half of the advertisers in this country are still on last click. Because it's easy, right? I spent money and I saw a return today. What's not to love? And then the marketers come and say, we're building a journey. And they say, that sounds like you're escaping accountability. But then instead I frame it this way. I said, instead of talking about brand and performance, one that's immediately measurable and one that's not, I would simply go, and one of the ways I adapt my language to some boards is I say, there's two functions we have to engage on as marketers. We need to create demand and we need to capture demand. If we don't create interest and awareness of our products, nobody's going to buy them. And if we tell everybody we're out there and a consumer comes in at the last minute, then you might as well call us TiVo because that's what they did. Phenomenal brand, nobody buys their stuff. And I say we need both of them side by side. Because if all we're doing is capturing demand for people that have never heard of our stuff, you can't expect me to sell. But these are two different interactions and two different types. And if I'm lucky, they get it. But oftentimes it's saying, we have, all of you have, all the pieces you need to be successful. It's just you're surrounded by other brilliant people in marketing that understand your same language. And so you mention remarketing, and there's not a pause, there's not a dictionary. You mention remarketing to a board, they gloss over and they say, these people are really smart, but I don't know. And so I'm going to fall back on my intuition and my level of trust. And that's not where we want them to be if we're putting in all that work into incrementality and data. And so it's really just simplifying down things. You can talk about your significant others if that makes you happy, but it is tying that together in a way that they can understand it to say, this is why we ask these questions. This is why we demand this data.
Mm-hmm. So you did a great job. The board loves you.
Hopefully, not always.
The next question might be, help me understand if my company is succeeding, is doing a good job. What are some of the KPIs? What are some of the questions that the board, I should be asking my CMO to make sure that we are all confident that we're actually building a framework that is sustainable and is driving both short-term and mid-term results for the company? Like, how would you continue that conversation?
Avinash taught me most of what I know in this space. So I'll defer to him, although I will add one point. Now, Avinash, I'm going to kick it over to you because I like your answer to these. One of the things that I try to get companies to look at is oftentimes the focus is solely internal. where they'll look and they'll say, what were our KPIs for the past couple of quarters? Are we doing better or worse? And they lose sight of what their competition is doing. And so there's not enough questions, I think, at the board level to say, how are we doing relative to our space, and more, how are we fighting against ourselves? And so not only do they lose critical areas of investment, so they're falling behind. We're not investing in a brand, our competitors are. That question isn't asked enough. But oftentimes they don't get recognition. Sometimes they can be best-in-class marketers, and they come back and simply say, our CPA is going up, so we're unhappy. And that's reflective of what's happening outside their doors, not necessarily their team itself.
Yeah. First, I spent, one of the connections Neil and I have is that I actually worked for 3 years with Liza, his wife, and she's absolutely incredible, and this bastard should be buying more flowers. She's amazing. I love Liza, and it was such a privilege to work with her for all these years. Anyway, I think the use case that Neil was touching is really common. The problem with going to a C-suite or a board as from marketing is if you actually simply look at what we are presenting as marketing, we present activity. And the board is asking for outcomes. So we spend this much money, we got these many views, we had this many impressions, these many Gen Zs got their jollies, I don't know, whatever the fuck. But like, we do all this crap, but at a CEO and board level, they are expecting outcomes. How much money, how many people walked through the door, what was the shifts in big KPIs. So for me, at a C-suite and the board level, just 3 simple things for marketing. You have to show how much incremental revenue you drove, that is effectiveness. You have to show what was the cost per incremental sale driven by marketing, that's efficiency. And third, a causal relationship to market share. That's it. Nothing else matters to them. Everything else is noise for us internally, right? And so you can go down to VP level, then you go down to director level, you go down to practitioner level. And we have these things, both Neil and I, that you just layer those down. But if it's simply you're going to see the board, the first lens to apply is, are we presenting activity or outcomes? That will cut your 97-slide deck to 6. And then in the 6, you have to say, am I presenting incrementality or am I presenting nonsense? That will cut it down to 2 slides. Now, on those 2 slides, you should have 3 things. Well, 4 things, I guess. What was the cost? So definitely start with the cost. You gave marketing $40 million. Put that on slide 1. Slide 2 should say $40 million resulted in $300 million of incremental revenue. Put the I in front of revenue, I revenue, that's what I say. And what it says is that these $300 million would not have occurred otherwise. Nico drove it. My Nico leads performance at Nespresso. It's all Nico. Give him another raise after 3 months. Second, the cost per incremental sale. So they can look at Nico and say, oh, well, last year you drove like 200 million, and the cost per incremental sale was 45. How come you drove 300, but the cost per incremental sale is now 90? And that puts Nico in a little bit of a hot seat. Good thing. That's a good thing. You're being honest with the board. And then they will ask Nico hard questions. Nico will in turn ask his agency, us, hard questions. And that's all good. And then the third one is over a long period of time, figure out market share. If you can say we drove 2 points in shift in market share, we drove a point, 3 points, it's truly game changing. So after like 2 years at Google, when I would have the opportunity to go to present to Ruth on Lorraine's behalf, the deck literally was cut down by 85%. Every 6 months you go to Ruth and say, can we please have another few $100 million? Maybe I see 2 slides, 3 KPIs.
So let me add a layer of complexity. So far, we're talking a lot about driving revenue. Let's talk about building brand. So like, how do we, let me just add a complexity. So the company wants to drive revenue as incrementally as it possibly can, but it also wants to build a brand, increase awareness. Like, how to add that as a layer when you're actually discussing measurement with the CFO. And Avinash, I think a year ago, at the brand performance event, we talked a lot about how much time does a CFO have, how much time does a CMO have, and that should also guide some of these conversations. Can you share a little bit more about how to actually expand and actually have kind of a brand performance conversation at a board level?
Yeah. First, like Neil's book, which you should all read in detail. It emphasizes the value of both the things that work and things that didn't work. Right? You have to look at both successes and failures. And if you read my first book, I think I paid a glancing nod to brand marketing. That's how dumb I was. One of the things I've learned as I've grown older is the very best performance marketing can do is help me defend my current market share. It might get me a point, it might prevent me from losing a point. But you operate in that point window, plus or minus one or so. If you're fantastic at performance marketing, that's the best it can do. You should do it. Because look, making money in short term is a very good thing. It keeps us all employed. If you want to go grow market share, 4 or 5 points of market share, you can only do it through brand marketing. Because it's the only way to bring new people into the franchise. It's as simple as that. Are you in the business of just defending your current market share, which is a necessary thing you should do? I do waterfall planning, Pooja and I were just doing it. Max out all the performance money. Because any money lying on the floor, pick it up. Just take it. Right? But we're also obsessed about long-term shifts in the fundamental business that we are in. So I was just in Newark last month working with Audible, our client. And we're planning long-term. Audible already owns pretty much all of the market share that exists in the market. But at Croud, we're obsessing about figuring out how to get them another 4 or 5 points, which is a really hard problem to solve. It's all brand, no performance. Right? So that's the one big difference we need, brand and performance. And obviously, to survive as a company for 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 years, you need to be really good at both. But I dare say you have to be better at brand than performance. Because it is how you survive for 50 years. Right? So that's the horizon we're looking at. So for me, I define them in those 2 simple clusters. The challenge, of course, that brand presents to all 3 of us is, how do you prove that doing something really good is going to get a positive outcome 6, 9, 18 months from now? And that's the art and science of it. And we can get into that a little bit. But for me, it's really simple. You want to be a great marketer. You want to show incremental impact from marketing. You have to figure out how to be great at brand and performance. And dare I say, if your CMO or CFO has a horizon that looks over 18 months, then obsess about brand marketing. It's the greatest gift in the world. So the CFO, global CFO of Coach is Alex. And he's like a rare bird, really rare, where he's like the CFO who obsesses about brand marketing. Because he really gets it. And I think that the reason he gets it is because the CMO of Coach and the people around the marketing team have helped prove through the work we've done together the value of long-term revenue impact of brand. So we'll come back to it, but I just wanted to frame that really important reason why you want to be in the business of doing both. It's harder, but it's more profitable.
Neil, any learnings that you have from your experience working with brands that are convinced that doing both are the right move?
To Avinash's point, having the right person in the role helps. If you have to convince a CMO that they need to do brand and they're against brand, and you get these, some businesses, it's like their rallying cry, we will not build a brand, and no one's ever heard of these businesses because of it. But that's a rallying cry, and they move from performance to performance where they will measure everything down to the exact penny and they'll hyper optimize every keyword, and they won't be interested at all in building a brand. And in some companies, I love the expertise of CPG and entertainment companies where brand is so central to their identity that they can bring those talents into more performance-oriented businesses and do phenomenally well. When Avinash mentions market share, I look into that a step further, which is to say, is there some type of metric that can look beyond short-term revenue to give you credit with what's happening in the wider market? Market share is ideal. In some companies, it's going to be brand awareness. I don't agree with it, but I'll take it if that's what they're going to drive. And you have to find that connection. In my work, I love looking at lifetime value. Because if you're looking 12, 18, 60 months forward, here's what I'll tell you. Most of the incrementality studies I've done in isolation around brand, it's very difficult to measure because I can't run a controlled test for 2 years in a market. It's impossibly difficult, and it's very difficult to get the patience to do it. So I lack any immediate short-term experimental metric on brand. What I can tell you is for the tests that we've run where we look at the lifetime value of acquired customers. So we're going to go out there next month and buy a whole bunch of customers. When you shut off brand, the value of those new customer acquisitions fall to the floor. They may spend the same amount in their first or second purchase, but they won't be with you as long. And in some businesses, if they're looking at lifetime value, what's the lifetime value of the customers we acquired this period? Then it starts to show through. But the lesson isn't really whether it's market share or lifetime value, is that there needs to be an institutional metric that people trust and say, it is important, it is key to our business that we're headed in this direction. And then brand can help support that evolution. Otherwise, the argument you're having is not around more brand spend, it's around saying, can we please, as an organization, have a metric that reflects our long-term success? Because otherwise, it's almost like not having a customer support function at a business, right? We're going to acquire a whole bunch of customers, but we're not going to take care of them. And then the marketing team's looking to say, how many more people do you think are out there that we can reach? And so it's having something that says we care about the long-term future, we can measure it, and then those are the indicators that usually brand activities help support.
And from your experience working with so many brands, is this a mandate from the CEO? Is this something that the CMO should facilitate internally? Like, how is this happening? What is the glue that is actually helping these silos work together?
It's usually a push and pull. So going back to the earlier statement, if my expectation is that that marketing experience is not at the C level, I do not expect them to see what I see. One of my favorite exhibits, this by the way, is at the end of this book. If you really want to read the story, just skip everything, go to the last chapter. I talk about how I embarrassed myself in front of a board one time. Because I came in, Avinash, I'll send you the deck, you'll laugh at me, it was pitiful. Was that I came in and I said, here's all the data we have about lifetime value and how we can invest. And the chairman's takeaway was, he said, all right, Google. Just Google us. Just Google. It's like, so what you're telling me is you want me to invest more in the future and trust that these customers are going to come back. But I pay you today. That was his takeaway. Long-term metrics, but you get your money now, and I don't get to blame you until a year or two if these customers come back. And so instead, we simplified it for a single slide. We didn't talk about lifetime value or the metrics. I simply said, here's your cohorts of customers. Here's your customers broken into 5 chunks. These customers are going to come back and spend lots of money. These customers aren't. Oh, and we're spending equal amounts for all the groups. And I said, well, wait, why are we doing that? I said, well, because you're only focused on what they're doing today. You don't care about what they're going to do in the future. And once they can connect those dots, then they walk with you on that journey. And so the first step with them is always education for how whatever that metric is ties to the success of their role and what they can claim. Because eventually, they're going to have to carry that story of yours forward to other groups. If it's a publicly traded company and they have to get on an investor call, the last person you want is Citi being like, oh, it seems like marketing budgets increased, but sales this quarter are relatively the same. What's going on? And they need to be able to tell the story about what they're doing long term. And groups can do this. They make investments all the time in the future into AI. This is the same part. They just have to respect it as such. An investment, not a cost.
Yeah. No, normally the pressure will come from 2 or 3 things. It's very common for the pressure to come where there's a generational change happening. So I drink an espresso every single day. And my home here and in California has Nespresso. When I go to Hong Kong, where my wife is from, I stay at the Conrad because they have an espresso machine in my room. Yeah, I'm a really loyal fan of Nespresso. And Jessica sent me the machine that I have here in my home. Thank you. But Nespresso doesn't mean anything to my daughter. She's 22. She has no sense of the brand. She sees that dad drinks Nespresso, but it doesn't mean anything to her. And so that's a very small example of a generational change that Nespresso needs to worry about. It has to mean something to my daughter if Nespresso has to be in business 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Usually that creates pressure. And that's a good pressure to think about. And you can imagine other examples while I'm talking about our Nespresso business. The second one is when the company is in trouble. I love those companies. You have missed guidance, you're growing at 2, 3, 4 -%, growing. And that creates pressure which comes from the CEO and the CFO. It's like, Jesus, how long can we grow at -4%? And I love those situations. I love a sense of urgency, drive change. And they will demand all these things. And then the last one is like my favorites, which is you have an ambitious CMO who is just sick and tired of business as usual. And we have loads. Sandeep obviously is my favorite because we work with Tapestry, but there are CMOs like Sandeep that just are like sick and tired of business as usual. And they push the entire organization in a new direction. And I don't mean marketing, like the entire business. I look for those 3 situations. And I find that if I can find one of those or something like that, then I can be a part of delivering transformative market share. How to do it, I have like a basket of tricks. I mean, 2 truckloads of them. That's what you get when you spend such a long time at Google. You collect 15 truckloads of tricks. But if those 3 things don't exist, then I sort of look, our CEO is here, he's the global CEO of Croud, and I tell Luke, in those situations, I slowly ease back from the client. There's nothing I can do. But where those 3 things exist, I know we can be part of like 4 or 5 point transformation in market share. That's the thing that I watch for. And obviously delivering plus 20, 30, whatever we want for the cohorts that we acquired for lifetime value. But I don't really lead with lifetime value. I don't lead with our favorite marketing metrics. And it's because they're just harder to understand. As easy as they are for all of us in this room, they're harder to understand. So I'll try and simplify it down to market share, incremental revenue, cost per incremental sale, no matter what kind of marketing you do. And it gets the engine revving in a direction that both Neil and I obsess about.
I want to keep my promise. So we have 20 minutes for questions from the audience.
Yep.
And then what I think will be really exciting is we'll have a more intimate moment with each of you in the discussions we'll have at the far end of the room. So we have some mics. We have 2 or 3 lying around. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to.
If you could start by just saying your name and company role so we can know a little bit more about you.
Oh, this more fun. Yeah, hi. I'm Paolo Provinciali, and nice to see you all. I lead growth marketing at LinkedIn, and I'm also former Googler. Neil and I shared a team for a while back. And my thank you for your perspective and also the confirmation bias of having 2 very clever people kind of like restating what I believe. So thank you for that. My question is about the conversation you both were having around the CFO and working with the finance team. And there is one aspect of it which is very interesting to me, which is the finance team oftentimes manages for the variance versus the plan, and therefore trying to figure out, okay, what is the outlook versus the plan? And that, by definition, brings them to have a bias towards a deterministic kind of way of seeing the world and understanding, okay, what's broken and what do I need to fix? To your, earlier, anecdote about Ruth, right? While measuring incrementality is much more of a probabilistic way of approaching if you do it right. And so, how do you bridge that gap in terms of saying, okay, you can go to Ruth every 6 months and say, okay, give me my check, or every year, but then in the day-to-day, especially when the outlook doesn't match plan, then there is a bunch of people below the C-suite that start freaking out, right? And so how do you manage that connection between the deterministic way of looking at incrementality versus the that way around, probabilistic, deterministic?
Yeah. So look, this is actually a really important question. One of the, again, acknowledging failures, as Neil encourages us to do, is when Ruth asked me that question, actually I spent the first 9 months building like complex MMMs and just going and saying, I'm going to answer this big question. And it's like fall flat on the face. It's like, no. And also at the end of it, it was useless. What do I do every day in my AdWords account? I'm old, I say AdWords. But So you have to figure out how to break the problem into pieces that are solvable. So if you've read my work on incrementality, I always say that there are 3 kinds of incrementality, and each of them solves a very different problem. And that's really important to sort out, because if you try to figure out the deterministic probability thing for the wrong question, you're screwed. Even if you're not screwed, you're not getting any more money, which is, we all want more money to do great things for our companies, right? So the first thing so I retrenched back. Instead of giving the God answer, it's like, come back. And then the first thing I built was this practice of channel silo incrementality. And so what's channel silo incrementality? It's answering the simplest possible question. I've put $10 million into Instagram. What happens if it's 0? I've put $5 million into LinkedIn. Too low. We should spend more on LinkedIn. What happens if I make LinkedIn 0? So channel silo incrementality is sucking the least, because it just says, in isolation of the channel, what is the incrementality? It's not the best answer, but it is a very good start. And so we use conversion lift studies to answer those questions. Deterministic. Test and control, baby. And the cool thing is, every single platform that is worth anything already has CLS built into it. Yeah, many years ago I worked on the CLS at Google, and then obviously Facebook has it. TikTok is going to release something in a couple months if they're still on. But I'm really excited. Once you answer channel silo incrementality, the team will come back and say, oh, what do you mean it's only 6%? That's it? I would have gotten all the other conversions from LinkedIn anyway? Like, yeah, that's what the thing is saying. Then you take one step back and say, I'm going to focus on in-flight optimization. There's a set of metrics and KPIs you begin to look at. And then you put ML on top of it. And then you're doing in-flight optimization automatically. Solve that problem. It takes care of the day-to-day. You have to take care of the day-to-day. The marketing every day has to suck less. And it happens with the lens of channel silo incrementality. And you answered the question of about 60%, 70% of the marketing organization. That's very important. So I came back starting there. Then the next question to answer is, I do quarterly planning of our marketing budget, pools of money I want to allocate. This is in partnership between the CMO and the CFO. Every quarter, every 6 months, they want to reallocate budgets. Where is the next best place for the additional dollar I want to invest or cut? So for that, we use large-scale experiments. I call it cross-stack incrementality. So across these silos, you want to try and make much smarter decisions. And so you're looking at comparing Facebook to TV, billboards to Google, YouTube to Hulu, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all solving different problems. But the question you're trying to answer is the question that only needs answering once a quarter. Because the daily thing you already solved. It's cross-stack incrementality. No platform gives you cross-stack incrementality for free. Why would they? So that's a practice you have to build in-house. Or you work with an agency like ourselves at Croud. And we'll build it for you, right? So we build genetic algorithms. We apply advanced machine learning, all these kind of cool shit to do large-scale experiments. But it's supporting the CMO and the CFO reallocating budget. Then the highest form of incrementality is portfolio incrementality. Every 6 months or a year, the CFO will talk to the CEO to figure out how much to cut marketing. I'm kidding. How much more money to give to marketing. And that question doesn't need to know, I'm doing this with Google paid keyword searches and my fucking remarketing and all this other crap. Nobody cares, the CEO and the CFO. They just want to throw everything in marketing, email and billboards and own organic social, if you're still doing it, et cetera, et cetera. Just put it all in one piece and say, if I put my entire marketing budget into a pool, what's the total incrementality? That question only needs answering every 6 months. If you're answering that question every day, you're fucked. Something is really wrong, right? You don't make that decision every day. And so you use very sophisticated media mix models. And you answer that question. So think of the problem in these 3 important layers, each of them answering a completely different question. And when you put these 3 layers in place, it takes a little bit of time, Start with channel silo, move to cross-stack, go to portfolio. You go on that journey, you will have one of the most sophisticated marketing practices known to mankind. And honestly, these discussions between deterministic and probabilistic, they're distractions. If somebody in the finance org is using those two words, something is wrong. Like, you're going to get fired. Finance people should never learn those words. Just leave it to us. We'll do it in secret in marketing teams. So use it as a clue. But it was a lesson I've learned on this journey. You solve those 3 layers, align to different questions with different pace of making decisions. And it ends up being a more harmonious outcome. Not easy. Nothing I said is easy. It all costs money. It all costs effort. It costs passion, right? But that's the way to get to the outcome that you're talking about. Sorry, long answer. You're from LinkedIn. I had to give you a gift.
I have to comment on something on the CFO side as well. The relationship is something that's a concern of mine just because of how they describe marketing as a whole. It's like every conversation is preceded by, well, you're an expense, right? They look at a big line item and they're like, imagine if we could reduce this, what we could do. And then the best we can do is to say, no, this helped you make more money. And they said, yes, but it's still an expense. I am very much against the language of ever calling marketing an expense. Now, Avinash clued us in when he was answering it. You mentioned invest a few times, which gains traction. Then we quickly go back to expense. Here's the way that I like to do it. Now, I don't mention this often, but this is the closest that I've ever been able to bridge into CFO language from the metrics that we have. Is I say, look, we're looking at if we look at, and I'll use lifetime value just because that's I love that area so much. But what is lifetime value? There's definitions of it. Here's what I look at it. Is we're predicting how much a customer is going to be worth to you. And then we're going to go backwards. And so if I draw it out on a whiteboard, I'm going to say, here's today, here's tomorrow, here's next year. And I'm going to say, we add it all up. That's your lifetime value. And then we discount it back to the current day. Discounted cash flows are the bread and butter of finance. They're not going to look at, well, we're going to go buy that building across the street. How much money can it make us today? You're not going to have a lot of real estate options if you're looking at immediate returns. You're going to say, how much is that real estate investment going to make us after 10 years? And then we discount it. And I go to them and I say, that's exactly what you're doing with marketing, except instead of looking at channels, look at customers. You're investing in this customer. How much is this customer going to pay you back? Now, individual customers are tough, so here's the language. It's actually called customer equity. What's customer equity? Take the lifetime value of all your customers, add them up. You get a really large number. If you stop looking at marketing spend by channel and the expenses that they come with, and instead say, we took a look at our customers as an asset. Every CFO, every CEO will agree. Their customers are the most important part of their business. If you're selling your business, they will value those cash flows. And I say, let's start there. Here's how much we expect your customers to spend over their time with you. And we discounted that back to the current day. Here's how much your customers are worth. So if you wanted to value a business, it turns out this is a really great way of valuing your business. We know how much those customers are going to spend. And so from there, I say, you're giving me $10 million. You could put that $10 million in real estate. You could put it in any other asset class. You could buy stocks. My challenge is to say, how much can I grow that value of your customer base with the $10 million you give me? And I'll let you in on a secret. That investment, that return on investment in customers is greater than any other investment option they have. You want to buy stocks, you want to buy bonds, you want to buy real estate, that's fine. I encourage you to invest in your customers. Let me oversee that investment. Let me prove to you what those cash flows are and hold me accountable the same way you do to real estate. Not saying how much money did we make from the building today and that's the sole collection of all of your value. No, let me prove to you that that will pay off over time. And what I'm doing is I'm changing it to say I'm just as valuable as your real estate group. You don't come to me and say, what were our expenses for these buildings? They're important. What I want to know is what's the long-term potential of what you're crafting. And that gets them excited because now there's an engine for the growth. If they're falling behind on their numbers, to say we're building something for the future. But it's also meeting them where they are. And so that's why I don't think, you're right, at Avinash's point, I don't think they know what probabilistic and deterministic actually mean. I had one CFO one time that came to me, we were talking about AI, And he asked this analyst, this guy Alex Chinian with me, he's like, so Alex, did you use Bayesian for this? And Alex just kind of freezes, and he's kind of looking at it, he's kind of rationalizing, well, he's like, I understand, but I don't know how that fits. And thankfully he cracks a smile, he's like, I have no idea what the hell you are talking about, but apparently if I say this during a meeting, then people respect me for what I know. In fact, I'm not sure they actually know the merits of these questions. I think they feel that they are required to ask and that we provide an answer. I'm not confident it's changing the outcome. And so with all of these, I find the solution is to meet them where they are. Don't stretch into my area to try to understand my products or these KPIs. Let me bridge it a little bit to you. You want to look at cash flows, you want to look at investments. This is your language. How closely can I match these marketing KPIs? So you can see that what you're doing is not spending money that's just going out quarter after quarter. You're investing in a huge asset that's showing defined repeatable value for our business. I really like CFOs, by the way. They're great people. It's just, we're in different language. That's it.
Yeah.
Different language, different standards.
That's a great way to frame it. We have time for one last question.
Yes. Oh, yeah, Eli.
Thank you. Neil, where you were going, I think, was really helpful for me, because I think part of the question is not simply validating the role of marketing, the contribution that we make, but back to this idea of the trade-offs they're making. Avinash, you made the point earlier. Are we investing, for instance, in additional sales force? Are we discounting products? Are we hiring HR? So do we need to, as marketers, better understand the mechanisms by which they weigh the value of those other pieces? I invest in the sales force, this should yield how much incremental revenue. Do we need to interrogate that? Or is it best that we just kind of stay into the place that we're most knowledgeable and establish our credentials?
You have to understand to the extent that they will expose it to you. Sometimes they don't want to. That's okay. You want to understand the outcomes they're weighing, but I don't get into the methodologies because they don't like it. Also, I don't have time. But it's actually helpful to understand that, when you're valuing, to Neil's point, 100 more tech support people, customer support people, what's the outcome you're valuing? Oh, it's eNPS. Like, okay, that gives me like a little clue. So understanding the investment variable, the investment outcomes they are using is very helpful. Because then it lets me reflect on marketing and say, wait, what am I bringing to the table? How many views were there? No, I'm kidding. But I don't usually get into methodologies because it just gets too complicated. And then I don't want to imply that I'm going to use anything close to the methodologies they're using for marketing. It doesn't make sense. But the outcome is really important. Oh, it's NPS here. It's foot traffic here. It's product innovation awards here. Those variables are really helpful to understand because, and we have a great CFO at Kate Spade, Jim, and this is like a mindset that I've learned from working with him, and like how he decides for Kate Spade where to put the money, and how does he think about marketing. So that's what I found is really, really helpful.
And I'll probably layer on one example where it's helpful. I think the closer you can get to those functions and understand the language, the better. I used to have a rule with my team that I didn't want them to sit at their desk more than 2 days a week. This was before the whole work from home thing. I wanted them to sit with other functions to understand their language, their assumptions, and also provide an interesting ground, if you could believe it, to solve problems of finance. And so one that we always wrestle with a lot of clients is that budget around experimentation. We want to test a whole bunch of stuff, but you take away budget from things you believe will already work. And so you're making those compromises. And if you're in a slow period, nobody wants to take away budget. Nobody wants to risk budget. And those are the experiments you have to run. And if they fail, then the whole organization's upset with you. And I was having this conversation one time with a CFO where I just said, this is the problem why marketing can't evolve, is because they don't have the budget to experiment. And he was actually surprised that marketing was trying to make that trade-off. So in his mind, marketing they can be 9 to 10% of on their expenses. Anything more than that, they're too hot for their investors. And I said, well, how do we test? Because I have to make this compromise. He's like, why don't we put testing in R&D? It's like, Wall Street loves R&D. He's like, I can run that up to 20, 25%. We're investing in the future. He's like, that shouldn't be your concern. Let's give you a separate budget for it. Now, I never considered that approach. I just thought it's a marketing problem. How we integrate our tech, how we prove our worth. That's for me to solve and for you to tell me, and I will then tell you the results. And sometimes I think that there are creative solutions that we can find. But if marketing isn't able to explain the struggles that we have, and that we're only confident about our metrics, then I think that those problems go unsolved. And
Can I give an example? As if you have time. Yeah. Actually, Neil triggered a thought. This is what we did at Google when I was part of the Media Lab team. You really do want to be you want to have a posture where you scrutinize yourself 10 times harder than finance. You change the posture from, oh, we're going to see finance, and you adopt a defensive armor. And you just suit up because they're going to shoot you. They change the posture. So actually, this is a really good example. One of the things, we didn't talk about brand measurement a lot, but like it's very hard to defend brand. But we put a whole bunch of portfolio and cross-stack incrementality in place. It's really good ticks. But then I found, like, what does it take to drive a point of brand lift? And you kind of work back through lots of meta-analysis. I mean, Google's got so much money and experiments. You can do whatever you want. So you do like 300 experiments, bunch of studies. And I found, there's two variables that drive basically brand at the end of the day. Just two things. One, 60% of the success is the creative. You have shit creative, doesn't matter. You have a creative that your CMO loves and no one else, doesn't matter. So like very, very brutal execution of figuring out how do I make great creative. So at Google, we used a company called Human-Made Machines. I love them, and now I work with them after I have left Google. But okay, great. So we'll test the creative and pre-test it against the target audience. Not Fernando, our CMO, flies private jet. I don't care what he thinks about the creative. I care about the target audience that we're going after, right? So test the creative. So I know I solve 60% of the problem if it is past creative. Second, they figure out, takes media. There's only one way to win brand fucking marketing. Frequency, nothing else. Frequency, 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 right? Big lesson. So Elijah and I love frequency. So we said, so there's a whole bunch of media variables. So we built a thing I named the Minerva check after the Roman goddess of wisdom. It's still used at Google. And so the Minerva check is simply a very slick algorithm. You put a media plan into it. It spits out a number if this media plan meets minimums, 40%. So 60% success plus 40%. That's what it takes to win brand marketing. Now, back to friggin' finance. How do I win their love? And so I went to our CFO for marketing, and I said, we're going to change the process with which you sign POs. I'm going to give you more power. Anybody at Google comes to you asking for money, they have to have at least 80% of the budget behind past creative, and 100% of the budget has to pass the Minerva check. And we changed the PO form with those two fields. And we said to finance, if you don't see those two things in the PO form, don't give marketers the money. Instantly, overnight, I became the most hated person in Google marketing. Because the finance team decided the way they are going to deny the money is say you failed the Avinash check. Fuck. No, not the fucking Avinash check. But the interesting thing is this fundamental shift in the relationship where marketing is like, oh my God. Finance is like, oh my God. These guys in marketing, they're like proactively are telling us how to deny money and where to spend money. Foundationally changed the relationship. Every single year after that, I was at Google. We got extra few $100 million from finance. And it's because we changed the paradigm of how we figure out what it takes to succeed. And I put that in the frickin' PO. And imagine the confidence it gives finance, like the trust it builds. I had to work on my reputation, right? But it elevated the whole organization. It is why you see such incredible marketing by Google. Consistently, year after year, year after year. Because we can bring more money to marketing, but also because it tied integration in finance. I just wanted to plan that practical example of something. And now, of course, at Croud now, we do that with our clients, global clients as well. But I wanted to honor this really great lesson I learned.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So we're trying to make this a very dynamic morning. So we have 2 tables at the very end of the room. To the left, Neil will invest another 25 minutes. Avinash, the table to the right. And Chris, head of agency at Google, will be facilitating one of the conversations. I'll do the same with the second conversation. And this is just us trying to keep this dynamic, and we'll continue the conversation in a more intimate setting. Thank you so much, and let's continue the conversation.